In the country, American agriculture studies the consequences of the breakthrough on tax reform. While in Washington, the merits of a national wheat referendum continue to be debated. Taxation, representation, and more coming up next.
This is the Friday, August 22nd edition of Market to Market, the journal of the nation's largest industry.
Hello, I'm Sid Sprecher. Chet Randolph is off this week. The nation was awash in economic news this week, some of it good, some of it bad. The budget deficit, despite Graham Rudman, continues to soar skyward and is assured to exceed last year's record deficit. Retail prices remained unchanged in July as falling energy prices offset increases in the cost of food. And the rate the Federal Reserve Board charges commercial banks for funds dropped to its lowest level in 9 years. The board lowered the rate after the release of a government report that showed economic growth at its weakest level since the '82 recession. But clearly, the biggest economic news out of Washington this week was a compromise on a massive tax reform package, a package many believe will alter the structure of American agriculture. When the Senate Finance Committee unanimously endorsed its version of tax reform last May, tax reformers in agriculture thought they had an instrument with which to correct the structural flaws of American farming. The original Senate measure would have hit hard the passive and corporate investment that many believe have created American agriculture's tremendous overcapacity. High tax bracket passive investors farming the tax codes to shelter their income from other sources have encouraged water to be piped to arid fields, feedlots and hog barns to be filled with tax-sheltered animals, all, say tax reform advocates, at the expense of farmers who must earn all their income from the land.
The big boys, they all got computers, got incorporated too. Me, I just know how to raise things. That was all I ever knew.
Taxes that encourage the substitution of capital for labor and tax policies that encourage substitution of capital for labor are irrational. They produce overproduction, lower farm prices, lower incomes. They shift the income that is available from the poor to the rich.
But say the reformers, the measure that barely crawled from the House Senate Conference Committee is hardly a panacea for what ails agriculture. Notably, reform advocates object to breaks that were retained by the Conference Committee for corporate so-called factory farms. The committee bill allows such farms to use cash accounting procedures to write off production expenses immediately, and it continues the use of accelerated depreciation write-offs for single-purpose farm buildings like confinement chicken or hog feeding facilities, a deduction that reformers say benefit corporations more than family farmers and encourage the expansion of agriculture's overcapacity. Additionally, say the reformers, the committee's elimination of income averaging could be a blow to farmers who've suffered losses in recent years. But the Conference Committee's bill is not barren of reform. It eliminates investment tax credits, which have encouraged passive investors to buy new facilities for tax purposes, and the committee's measure limits such breaks as cash accounting to only those who are materially involved in the management of a farming operation.
Can I have you lean forward for a second? I'm going to listen to your back.
Also, farmers, under the committee bill, will be able to deduct half the cost of their health insurance. And those troubled farmers who are able to restructure their debt won't have the burden of paying taxes on the amount of the write-down. The tax bill is a compromise that for family farmers exchanges short-term hardship for longer-term structural change. And there is some evidence the measure is already having an effect. For example, cattle feeding in some southwestern feedlots currently may find as much as 40% of its financing through tax shelter money. Last week's 7-state cattle on feed report shows 43% more cattle being placed on feed than a year ago. And the reason for that, say many in the industry, is that tax shelter cowboys are on their last roundup before the tax bill becomes law. The government this week trimmed its estimate of American farm exports to $26.5 billion for this fiscal year. And although farm trade will remain at a surplus, it will reach its lowest total in 9 years and will be 39% below the 1981 record. The USDA blamed the decline on the drop in Soviet grain imports, continued large foreign production, intense foreign competition, and financial constraints in many developing countries.
In the boardroom, the losses mount. Citing a continued steep decline in North American farm equipment sales, Deere & Company this week reported a net loss of almost $40 million for the third quarter of its 1986 fiscal year. It was the third straight quarterly loss for the giant farm equipment maker, which had a net gain of $4.5 million for the same quarter in fiscal 1985. Deere also announced worldwide sales were down 5% for the third quarter on sales of nearly $1 billion.
A newspaper poll released in Nebraska this week shows the public believes it is uncontrollable economic forces, not Reagan administration policies, that are plaguing the nation's farmers. That's a tough opinion for many farmers to accept. Clearly, there are those in farm country who think the White House is responsible for much of what ails American agriculture. The conflicting viewpoints on the recent national wheat referendum provide a good example. The administration hated the idea. Many in farm country liked it. Indeed, even though the votes have been in for over a week, there are those who feel the outcome was foretold by the administration's handling of the balloting. The votes that were returned last week via farmer ballots seem to indicate in no uncertain terms that few wheat farmers were interested in the issue of mandatory production controls, although a majority of those who did return their ballots did indicate they want such controls. But the 78% who did not return their ballots have given ample ammunition to an administration which has given little, if any, thought to implementing such controls. Indeed, the administration appears likely to continue to ignore the call for mandatory supply management. In a brief press release, Secretary Ling dismissed the poll.
Based on the relatively small response to the wheat poll, I don't think a great deal of significance can be attached to the results. I therefore consider the poll to be inconclusive.
I think the turnout was much higher than what the administration indicates that it was. They're going to try to minimize every way possible this vote because it runs contrary to what their policy is.
Production control proponents, too, think the poll is inconclusive, but they say that's because of the way the USDA administered it.
They mailed out ballots to everybody in the world, landlords, tenants, folks who have only marginal interest in wheatland, and so of full-time farmers, in my judgment, the participation was closer to 50% rather than 22%.
In fact, of the 312+ thousand ballots returned, but 31% were from those who were involved in operations of more than 40 acres of wheat. However, the numbers released by the USDA do not indicate how many of the respondents were full-time farmers, and production control proponents have indicated the issue lives.
I'm just saying that the current program, a voluntary program that's based on low prices, is not working because it doesn't reduce production. So what this referendum showed me is a majority of farmers who cared enough to go out and vote, of wheat farmers, want more mandatory reduction in supply. Now, specifically, I don't know exactly how they would want to devise that program, but all I can tell you is after the election in November, when the costs of the current program reach $35 billion a year, we're going to have to come back and do something in farm policy more like what farmers voted on.
4 more Midwestern banks failed this week, 1 each in Illinois, Kansas, Texas, and Colorado. Officials at the United Bank of Minneapolis, Kansas, which had assets of more than $23 million, said agricultural losses completely absorbed the bank's capital and loan loss reserves. The closings brought the number of bank failures in the U.S. this year to 94. At least half of those were farm banks. And from Washington, the Farm Credit Administration refused to allow the Amarillo, Texas Production Credit Association to withdraw from the farm credit system. A court case is still pending.
At home, charting a future for rice and cotton. The Chicago Rice and Cotton Exchange, successor to the New Orleans Commodity Exchange, began trading in rough rice futures this week on the floor of the Chicago Board of Trade. Trade officials said changes in the pricing structure for U.S. rice have increased the need for a hedging mechanism for the rice industry. They said the futures market will counter the effects of the 1985 Farm Bill, which in essence removed the price floor and allowed prices to fluctuate with the world rice market.
For decades, it was a closed society, a country shrouded in mystique. But in recent years, the People's Republic of China has undertaken economic and social changes that are transforming the face of the most populous nation on earth. For example, it was reported this week that China's trade with the European Economic Community increased 26%, or rather 28%, in the first 6 months of this year. That makes the common market China's third largest trading partner. Such trade improvements bode well for China's vast number of peasant farmers who, as Ross Bill of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation explains, are happily discovering the wonders of a new economy.
As recently as 2 years ago, all these people would have been arrested. Dancing Western style was illegal. But now the dance halls are full every night, and for 3 cents, Louis Hongzi, he prefers to be called Stuart, and his girlfriend can take their pick of 20 venues in their city of Kunming. Once it was egalitarianism, now it's consumerism. The private car is beyond their means, but the dream is implanted. It works. The economy is booming, fueled by workers aspiring to own something new.
And what are the changes that you've seen, say, over the last 2 years in your city?
So many changes happened in the last few years, in the past few years. You may see along the street many new shops opened, and you may see many various goods on the sale. That's a result of our responsibility system.
It's a simple incentive scheme that touches Stuart every Sunday when he shops.
They have become rich in the past few years, and farmers here, I think, make them rich by selling farming products, and that's only their sideline occupation.
But for you also, there's been a transfer of wealth. As the people in the country have become wealthier, surely it's affected your life also.
Yes, of course.
Produce from the countryside in the province of Yunnan finds its way onto the farm products market in Kunming, a city of 2 million. To then sell privately, you must pay a tax of about 50 cents a day and register with the market authorities. The profits are yours to keep.
Stuart, how often do you eat meat now?
I think twice a day.
Twice a day, every day of the week?
Of course.
And what was it like 5 years ago?
5 years ago, we just eat the meat once a month.
Once a month only?
Yeah.
The eel sellers are a new breed in China's new markets. Not farmers, middlemen. They're not called capitalists. It's a word the Central Committee does not approve. Instead, this free market, according to the leaders, is socialism with Chinese characteristics integrating Marxism with the local economy. If that can be said of the city traders, then it's hard to call the producers of food anything but capitalists. They produce as much as they can for a personal profit. Some of the country's leaders are concerned that these producers of food are becoming too rich too quickly, accentuating the difference between the rural haves and the city have-nots. But most provincial leaders, like Zhao Qutian, are staunch supporters of the new order. Zhao is Stuart's boss, and like Stuart, he began life as an interpreter in Kunming. He's seen a lot of changes.
When I was the same age as Stuart, 23 years old, the policy of the Communist Party was very good. Then, during the period of the Cultural Revolution, everything was damaged, everything. The national economy was on the brink of collapse. The farmers could not grow enough to eat, let alone have clothes to wear.
Today, there are many farmers considered to be new millionaires.
Today, we don't have to give everything to the state. The responsibility system means that if you grow more, you can keep more for yourself. So the production of food has increased beyond our dreams. And it seems now that every year for the farmer is a good year. There's no such thing now as not enough to eat.
A few years ago, the state owned the ducks. Today it's private. And with that, the supporters of the new order, like Zhao Kudian, have gone from city villain to hero of the peasants.
What a changed world these children are growing up in. It wasn't so many years ago there was no private enterprise at all, and there was a real discouragement for mixing with foreigners. In Zhao Kudian's case, he was locked in a cowshed for 2 years because he learnt Russian. But today, there is free enterprise, and all these children are being actively encouraged to learn English.
In their village of Huizi, no longer are the thoughts of Chairman Mao broadcast to the students and workers in the early morning. Idealism has been replaced by pragmatism. Free tertiary education was abolished in May, and student allowances are now based on academic performance, a long, long way from the thoughts of Chairman Mao. Life in Huizi changed dramatically for Yao Baozheng in 1979, when she became the first person to set up a private business under official approval.
When I started rabbit farming in 1979, it was a little difficult because I have no experience. I remember the first pair that cost me 3 yen.
That initial investment of $1.60 has brought Yang relative wealth and cut her working time from 10 hours a day in the old commune system to 3 hours today. Madame Yang's home is decorated with the trophies of her success. She was invited to speak at the National Congress to tell of her experiences on the road to riches.
As you can see, life is getting better. I have bought a television, a tape recorder, a sewing machine, a bicycle, and my husband and the 4 children all have a watch.
Over the last 2 years, China's crop production has increased by 90%. The peasants still farm the same land, the same techniques. The only change is there's now an incentive to produce more.
Coming up next, the Market-to-Market Report, the pick of the marketplace.
Well, cash hogs and October futures hit new highs this week, but lack of demand set cattle and dressed beef prices back a little. Currencies again made new highs against the dollar, but it didn't help the grain prices much. Soybean meal rallied on more business out of Rotterdam, but Friday, November beans equaled their low, and September corn recorded some new lows. But the government-produced commodity, PIC certificates, have been traded on an active market. And here now to pick up where he left off last week is one of our crack analysts, Doug Jackson. Now, last week, Doug, we talked quite a bit about a PIC strategy to avoid some of the storage crunch, and we've had a number of questions about it, so what I'd like to do is just retrace that strategy.
Well, as we understand it right now, as government policy unfolds, farmers will be able to present certificates at the same moment that they apply for new crop loans. Of course, this implies that if you were going to redeem your entire crop, that you'd have to go into the market and buy more certificates than the government has issued you. But you would apply for the loan, apply those certificates, and the government would entitle you then to receive your loan, and it instantaneously would forgive the loan. You'd have those proceeds and you could go sell your crop. Now, the key point here, of course, is that this could potentially be one way out of the false storage problem. You would be able to garner the loan proceeds and the other benefits from the government program without storing the crop. The government, of course, is also going to pay you an additional 5 cents of loan if that crop is placed on the ground, but the use of the PIC certificates to instantaneously redeem these loans perhaps would mean that that corn did not need to be on the ground but more than a few days, whatever time it took to just process this. And when we understand it, it should be simultaneous. So this is a certificate program that the farmer needs to be aware of, another marketing alternative we need to look at. Now, last week we talked about PIC certificate values, and they have slumped some this week.
So there are opportunities.
So yeah, prices are down towards the 112% level, slightly lower for future delivery. But the farmer needs to be aware of the fact that, for instance, on a $1,000 face value certificate, if your posted county price was $1.35, that the government would convert or forgive close to 740 bushels of indebtedness given that face value and that particular posted county price. Well, the loan is going to be taken out at $1.86 roughly. So we'd have a situation where a $1,000 face value certificate could actually be used to have close to $1,350 worth of government indebtedness eliminated. And this would, in theory, present the farmer with an opportunity to make up to 35% over the face value of that certificate. Now, of course, the farmer can take out the loan and get those proceeds and still sell the certificate. So this only applies to situations where the farmer does not have storage and is forced to sell corn. Not a single bushel of corn should be sold this fall that does not have a loan taken out on it and is immediately redeemed. No one should be in a situation where they simply have to sell corn at today's prices without briefly taking advantage of the government opportunities through this instant pick redemption procedure.
What about in some cases farmers have already prepaid storage?
Okay, the pick calculation that each individual producer is going to have is going to depend on all the variables that affect his own operation. The posted county price in his local vicinity, the cash price, and any costs that he's already laid out. And the more costs that you've committed to already, the less attractive this is going to be. This decision has got to be looked at and made prior to investing in storage and other costs that are not recoverable.
Now, when a farmer signs up under the loan program, usually he's required to show some storage capacity or capability.
Well, we have the new angle this year that corn loans, and in fact a nickel premium on corn loans, will be granted for corn stored on the ground. So we have a totally different situation than in the past where warehouse receipts or bins needed to be measured. How the government's actually going to verify how much corn is in a pile on the ground is yet to be seen. But this gives us a whole additional new marketing alternative. Now, we talked that pick certificate values dropped this week because of a potential change in government sales policy on their government inventory. We expect an announcement very shortly, probably effective early next week, where the government will be selling 3 yellow corn on account of damage, and any corn that is 14.5% moisture or higher, and this will be offered for cash at prevailing market prices. Now, what this basically does is opens up a huge quantity of corn that will be offered at much cheaper levels. This can be purchased by commercial operators without certificates. So this change in the program has potentially, for the moment, dropped the demand for certificates some and has increased dramatically the potential supply of corn. So corn basis and corn prices were under pressure all week because of this change. So we do see government policy changing, but we believe the basic concept that pick certificates will be able to be used to redeem new crop loans this fall is going to remain intact, and those certificates should at least hold their value as a way to stop storage costs this fall, to stop quality deterioration problems, and to reflect whatever undervaluation the government has in the local price and the PCP pricing mechanism.
We have about 45 seconds left. Rumors and innuendo, are there any new sales prospects on the horizon that would move any of this grain out here?
Well, in terms of additional rumors, first of all, of course, the marketplace is anticipating the announcement of the 1986 loan provisions on soybeans, and Secretary Ling Friday said that by a week from this Friday, he will make that announcement. During the day, various rumors centered on the possibility of government forgiveness of old crop interest against the loans and maybe dropping the CCC selling price. Both, of course, would be negative.
All right, well, thank you, Doug. That wraps up this edition of Market to Market. We'll be back next week to continue our look at Chinese agriculture, and we'll be examining the nature of Soviet collective farming. Until then, for Chet Randolph, I'm Sid Sprecher. Thanks for joining us. Have a good week.
Market to Market is a production of Iowa Public Television, which is solely responsible for its content. This program was made possible by grants from the Central Educational Network and this and other public television stations. The auction chant of a foreclosure sale in the country, crosses on courthouse lawns, and bank failures in small towns, sure signs of troubled times in rural America. From the farm to Main Street, no television program covers the life and death issues of rural America like Market to Market. For news from the heartland, join Market to Market each week on this public television station.